During an extravagant celebration held at the illustrious Carlisle estate, a moment of inexplicable recognition shook the soul of Edmund Carlisle, a formidable millionaire in his 50s, whose life had been dictated by duty and high society. The expansive ballroom, known in this retelling as the Bellevue Hall, shimmered under the warm radiance of crystal chandeliers. As Edmund surveyed the opulent surroundings from a private balcony overlooking the festivities, a sudden flash of memory halted him in his tracks. Amid the throng of elegantly dressed guests from the prestigious Northborough Society, whose voices melded into a familiar yet oppressive symphony of privilege, his eyes locked onto a subtle yet unmistakable gleam. It was the sight of an emerald ring, a piece of jewelry that seemed to hold a secret of its own, nestled on the finger of one of the young waitresses. In that suspended moment, Edmund's thoughts traveled back more than 2 decades, to a time when love and defiance intertwined. He recalled the night he had bestowed that very ring, a magnificent emerald adorned with diamonds, upon his beloved Lucinda Whitman. Lucinda, with her genuine, unassuming grace and an intellect that had captivated him instantly, had vanished from his life on a fateful evening 25 years ago, leaving behind nothing but a bittersweet memory and a cryptic note. Now, as the soft murmur of conversation and polite laughter filled the grand hall, Edmund's heart pounded with the weight of that unresolved past. The lavish setting, a spectacle of polished marble floors and intricately carved pillars, buzzed with the energy of guests celebrating his milestone birthday. His son Theodore, already a prototype of the modern elite at just 22 years old, with credentials from Oxford Business School and a wardrobe that spoke of meticulous taste, approached him with a congenial, "Happy birthday, Dad." Theodore's polished demeanor, embodying years of entitlement and expectation, belied an undercurrent of personal ambition as he casually mentioned plans to expand their business into the vibrant markets of Asia. Edmund gave a distracted nod, his mind far from the routine chatter of board meetings and quarterly projections. Instead, it was the delicate glimmer of emerald on a waitressing hand that sent his memories spiraling. As fate would have it, the young server, a poised woman identified as Isabelle by her name tag, carried herself with a quiet dignity despite the clamor of the party. With chestnut hair neatly tied back and eyes that shimmered with hues reminiscent of hazel and amber, she exuded an enigmatic charm that stirred in Edmund an unsettling blend of nostalgia and hope. When Edmund softly inquired, his voice laced with equal parts longing and disbelief, "Where did you get that ring?" Isabelle appeared momentarily rattled. In a hushed tone, she revealed that the ring had once belonged to her own late mother, a woman named Sarah Whitman, whose memory lingered in the shadow of a mysterious past. The surname resonated with unfamiliarity, a sharp divergence from the name Whitman, which had once been so deeply intertwined with his lost love. Yet, before the intensity of this unexpected conversation could deepen further, Theodore interjected, reminding his father that the guests awaited the toast. With the forced courtesy of a man accustomed to the show of social ritual, Edmund accepted the champagne flute, though his thoughts remained captive to the vision of that singular, life-altering piece of jewelry. Even as the celebrations resumed their course, a quiet turbulence simmered beneath his composed exterior. Later, when the revelry had given way to introspection in the quiet hours of the night, Edmund found himself alone in his mahogany-paneled study, overlooking the transformed skyline of a sprawling metropolis far from the origins of his wealth. Seated at his grand desk, Edmund reviewed a tattered leather journal, a private collection of memories chronicling his once devout romance with Lucinda Whitman. Among the yellowed photographs and carefully preserved mementos lay echoes of summer days spent on a sunlit beach in a coastal retreat, where Lucinda's contagious laughter had momentarily brightened the otherwise somber corridors of his life. Despite the polished facade of his empire and the meticulously curated life of public achievement, the journal's contents served as a painful reminder of a love that had ultimately been sacrificed on the altar of societal expectations. Determined to unearth the truth behind the mysterious ring and the identity of Isabelle's mother, Edmund discreetly initiated an investigation. Enlisting the aid of a trusted associate, Conrad Hayes, a man whose methods were both subtle and precise, Edmund outlined his plan to trace every scrap of information on Isabelle Whitman and the elusive Sarah Whitman. With requests for DNA testing arranged quietly and investigations into old-school yearbooks, neighborhood records, and sparse digital footprints, Edmund's pursuit of the truth became an urgent quest to reconcile the contradictions of his past and present. In the dim glow of his study, with the faint echo of champagne toasts and hushed conversations still ringing in his ears, Edmund clutched the memory of the emerald ring tightly. He could not shake the possibility that fate, in its ironic elegance, might be trying to tell him that a long-lost fragment of his heart was not entirely out of reach. The ring, once a symbol of a forbidden romance with Lucinda, deemed an unsuitable match by his elite world, now shone as an emblem of reawakened hope, of mysteries yet to be resolved. For, behind the polished veneer of his success lay the poignant truth of a man who had spent a lifetime navigating between duty and desire, between a love that was lost and the possibility that it might somehow endure. In the wake of a heart-wrenching farewell whispered in the shadows, "Please don't look for me," Edmund Carlisle found himself spiraling into memories he had long tried to bury. For months after that desperate plea, he had relentlessly pursued the trail of the woman who had vanished from his life, employing private investigators and exhausting every resource at his disposal. Yet each lead ended in disappointment until he was forced to accept that she had willingly chosen a life hidden from his grasp. His grieving mother, a voice of unexpected compassion in a world ruled by cold ambition, had encouraged him to abandon the past and concentrate on the future of Carlisle Enterprises. Only 6 months later, at the climax of a pivotal corporate merger, Edmund had found himself marrying Elizabeth Wilson, a union devised purely as an astute business maneuver, a contract that left him emotionally numb as he mimicked the rituals of a life dictated by society's expectations. A sharp rap on his mahogany-paneled office door abruptly tore him from his reverie. "Come in," he called, hastily closing the well-worn journal that had chronicled the intimate echoes of his former love. In strode Agatha Douglas, the devoted housekeeper who had served the Carlisle family with unwavering loyalty for decades. At 70, Agatha moved slowly, yet every measured step resonated with a familiarity steeped in history, as if the sprawling estate were her true home, an assertion she had repeatedly made despite Edmund's offers of an easier retirement. Placing a carefully balanced tea tray on his desk, she remarked with gentle chiding, "You missed lunch, Mr. Carlisle. You must eat." Grateful yet distracted, Edmund murmured his thanks, his attention caught not by the aromatic steam rising from the delicate cups, but by memories that threatened to break through his composed exterior. Their conversation soon drifted toward a name imbued with the bitter-sweet taste of nostalgia. "Agatha," Edmund began hesitantly, "do you recall Lucinda Whitman?" The mere mention of her name caused the teacup in Agatha's hand to tremble ever so slightly. "Miss Whitman," she replied, her voice a fragile whisper, carrying years of recollections. "I remember well. A lovely, bright young woman." Edmund's tone grew laced with melancholy as he recalled the precious emerald ring he had given Lucinda, a ring that once belonged to his own grandmother and that had become the symbol of their doomed passion. Agatha's delicate hands stilled for a moment before she resumed her tasks with an artful air of nonchalance. "That ring has always been a strange talisman, Mr. Carlisle. It seems an object can unlock memories as vivid as if they were happening in the present." Noting her discomfort, Edmund quickly inquired if she needed anything else. "No, thank you, ma'am," he assured her, though his mind churned with the unsettling certainty that Agatha held unspoken truths about the past. Later that evening, within the genteel confines of the Carlisle Estate's library, Edmund encountered his children Alex and Isabella, deep in conversation over the prospects of a significant acquisition. Their discussion, centered on the strategic details of the Campbell merger, halted abruptly as he entered the room. "Forgive me for interrupting," he said, casually, pouring himself a drink as if to mask the tumult within. Alex, ever the practical one, stammered an excuse about the meeting while Isabella's curious gaze settled on their father. "Something is amiss, father," she observed softly, her expression a perfect blend of compassion and hidden calculation. Edmund, though reluctant to divulge his inner turmoil, mentioned the curious incident with the server from his recent birthday celebration. A fleeting encounter with a young woman whose choice of jewelry had struck a dissonant chord within him. In an attempt to deflect further interrogation, he brushed aside the topic as mere coincidence, attributing his peculiar behavior to the overwhelming weight of turning 50, a milestone that often instigated introspection. Yet the question of family history soon re-emerged. Isabella casually inquired about details of their maternal lineage. "What do you know of your mother's side?" she prodded, referring to the Wilsons with a mix of detachment and interest. Alex contributed timidly that Uncle Richard was the sole remaining link from that side, while Isabella recalled that their grandparents had passed away long before she had any recollection. Edmund's vague reply, couched in the reflective musings of a man confronting decades of buried secrets, barely concealed the unease his past had planted within him. Not long after this brief familial exchange, Edmund excused himself to a modest coffee shop on the outskirts of Newbridge, a quaint town that bore little resemblance to the glittering urban centers he was accustomed to. Here, in a secluded corner offering an unobstructed view of the entrance, he awaited the arrival of Isabelle Whitman. True to her punctual reputation, she entered exactly at 10, her hesitant eyes betraying the gravity of the meeting. "Thank you for meeting me." Edmund greeted her with measured warmth as she slid into the seat opposite him. Unwrapping her silk scarf with a deliberate care, Isabelle admitted that a persistent assistant had insisted she speak with the CEO of Carlisle Enterprises, though she had little explanation for the summons. Their conversation soon veered to the mysterious ring adorning Isabelle's finger. "The ring you wore at my birthday gathering," Edmund began, his voice soft yet laden with significance, "was a cherished heirloom, a ring bestowed upon Lucinda Whitman on the eve of her disappearance 24 years ago." Isabelle's hand moved instinctively, as if to hide or protect the enigmatic jewel. Her initial astonishment slowly gave way to a wary contemplation, and when Edmund slid an aged photograph of Lucinda capturing her youth and radiant smile across the table, Isabelle's fingers trembled in a silent gesture of recognition and pain. In hushed tones, Edmund recounted the tragedy. A love affair deemed impossible by society, an arranged marriage that had since cemented his future yet left an indelible void in his heart. "Conrad Hayes' preliminary DNA analysis," he confided with quiet resolve, "confirmed beyond doubt that you are my biological daughter." Isabelle's face drained of color as she absorbed the revelation. "My father died before I was born," she whispered, her voice caught between incredulity and fear. "Then how?" she began, but Edmund interjected gently. "I seek only the truth, a chance for redemption after years of failure to find the one I truly loved." With a trembling challenge in her eyes, Isabelle demanded a DNA test to validate the claim, to which Edmund agreed under the solemn condition that if he were mistaken, he would forever sever this connection. Their voices waned into a heavy silence as both contemplated a future stitched together by newly unearthed secrets. As the meeting concluded, Isabelle left with a promise to ponder and a card bearing Edmund's personal number clutched tightly in her hand. Alone at the table, with a now lukewarm cup of coffee, Edmund reflected on the storm that had just passed, a torrent of emotions that stirred the foundations of his meticulously constructed world. Over the next few days, confirmation from Conrad Hayes arrived, substantiating the claim with an astonishing 99.9% probability. In the corridors of Carlisle Enterprises, Edmund's directive soon shifted. He summoned Beatrice Langley, his steadfast assistant, and ordered her to create a new position of community outreach coordinator with a salary fitting someone possessing a master's in social work. "Set up an interview with Isabelle Whitman," he instructed curtly, "but let no one know of my involvement." In the midst of a frenetic board meeting and a flurry of business calls, one of which was a snide reminder from Alex regarding missed investor calls, Edmund's personal crisis intertwined inexorably with his corporate responsibilities. Confronted by mounting pressures and whispers of board dissatisfaction, he found himself stung by his own inherent contradictions. In that moment, as he glowered at his son with the fierce defiance of a man accustomed to commanding empires, he declared, with cold finality, "Do not presume to scrutinize my schedule. I built this." In the midst of a tense corporate evening, Edmund Carlisle's carefully constructed world began to tremble with revelations that threatened to upend both his personal and professional lives. As he prepared to depart for another obligatory meeting with his board members, one that he was forced to reschedule at the last minute, Theodore, his ambitious son, could only grumble, "I'm handling the meeting myself," his jaw clenched in indignation. Robert, unruffled yet painfully aware of the growing distance between father and son, replied coolly, "You will manage it. Consider this an opportunity to learn." With that, he gathered his coat and stepped into his private lift, casting a brief backward glance at Theodore, whose resentful gaze burned with silent protest. Theodore's temper, fueled by a sense of entitlement deeply ingrained since childhood, was becoming an increasingly complex challenge for Robert. The privileges conferred upon Theodore and his sister Evelyn had long been mistaken for birthrights, but perhaps those notions were nearing a transformative reckoning. Later that night at the Sterling mansion, in the hushed luxury of a stately dining hall, Robert discovered Agatha, the family's venerable housekeeper, meticulously polishing silverware. Agatha's gentle occupation, which she claimed steadied her nerves, took on a deeper significance as Robert broached a subject laden with personal anguish. "You know about Lucinda and my child, don't you?" he asked without any preamble, his voice a mixture of yearning and accusation. Agatha paused, setting down a silver serving spoon, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and regret. "Mr. Sterling, matters from that time are complicated," she murmured hesitantly. "Then please, simplify them for me," Robert urged, his tone firm yet desperate for clarity. With a slow, weighted nod, Agatha confessed that she had known about Lucinda's pregnancy at the time of her disappearance, a truth she had guarded for years. "I did help her escape, Mr. Sterling," she admitted, her voice trembling with residual fear. "She was terrified, not of you, but of what your mother and Mrs. Morris might do." At the mention of his late mother and Elizabeth Morris's lineage, Robert's disbelief rippled through him. "Are you saying that my own mother and Blackwood conspired to force Lucinda away?" he demanded, his voice low and seething with cold fury as Agatha sorrowfully confirmed, "Yes, sir, they did all they could to keep you apart." The betrayal cut him deeply, leaving him to sink into a dining chair as the full weight of decades-old treachery twisted his insides. Before Agatha could reveal more, the dining room door swung open and Evelyn entered, her impeccable timing both a blessing and a curse. "There you are, Daddy," she said lightly, though her eyes darted over the scene with palpable skepticism. Sensing the gravity of the matter, she quickly remarked, "By the way, Theodore just called. He mentioned you left him alone to lead the presentation on our new expansion plans." Robert's terse reply, "He's more than capable," did little to shield the deeper currents of tension swirling beneath the surface. Evelyn's calculating gaze bore into him. "Something is happening, Daddy. First, the mysterious waitress at your party, and now secretive conversations with Agatha. This isn't like you," she observed softly. Robert met her steady stare, his tone even, but laden with unresolved sorrow. "There's much about me that you haven't been told." Before the exchange could continue, Evelyn threw in a final caution. "Just be careful. Theodore is already fuming." As she left, Agatha's soft whisper reached him. "Please, Mr. Sterling, be careful. The past doesn't always remain hidden for a reason." The echo of those words haunted him as he retreated to his oak-paneled attorney's office, where the leather-bound journal of his late wife awaited. Bartholomew, the family's dedicated attorney of over 30 years, cleared his throat and apologized for not delivering the journal sooner. "Mrs. Morris left strict instructions that this journal was only for you, to be opened 6 months after her passing," he explained, his voice barely concealing his own sorrow. Running his fingers over the embossed initials, EWM, on the cover, Robert felt a sharp reminder of the woman he had never truly known, despite sharing decades of a loveless partnership. "Did you ever read it?" he asked quietly. Burke shook his head, emphasizing that confidentiality extended even beyond death. After signing the necessary documents, Robert pressed the journal into his briefcase and left without further exchange. Instead of returning straight to the office, he directed his driver to take him to a modest park overlooking the serene waters of River Haven, a place where he and Lucinda once spent languid Sunday afternoons under brisk October winds. Settling onto a familiar bench, Robert finally opened the journal. Elizabeth's meticulous handwriting filled the pages, as though each carefully penned word was a confession meant solely for him. One entry, dated March 15, 2023, began with a stark acknowledgement of mortality. "The doctors have given me 3 months," Elizabeth wrote, "of unresolved truths regarding Lucinda Whitman and the secret child that had haunted their entwined lives for 24 long years." Her confession was raw and bitter, an anguished admission of her complicity and the sacrifices demanded by family legacy. As Robert turned each page, he felt the searing betrayal of a woman who had known more about his lost love than he ever did. Elizabeth recounted how Blackwood had visited under the guise of concern, his true intent to silence her and maintain their treacherous secrets. Her final entry, just weeks before her untimely death, bore the damning revelation: a DNA test authorization form confirming that his estranged daughter was indeed his flesh and blood, her true identity concealed beneath the alias Isabelle Whitman. Before Robert could fully process this disclosure, his phone vibrated. A call from Beatrice Langley, his long-trusted assistant. "Sir, Isabelle Whitman is here for her interview," she announced. Robert's voice, resolute yet heavy with conflicted purpose, commanded, "Tell them I will conduct it personally." Arriving at Sterling Enterprises, he found Isabelle waiting in a small conference room, dressed in a navy suit that hinted at professional poise, yet betrayed an undercurrent of apprehension. "S. Whitman," he began, closing the door behind him. "Thank you for coming." Her expression shifted rapidly from surprise to wariness as she stammered an apology for the subterfuge, confessing that she had never expected to have a direct conversation with the man who might be her father. After a long, tentative silence in which both sought solace in the muted rustle of papers and the distant hum of office activity, Robert laid out the truth as he knew it, leaving no detail unspoken. The raw edges of his revelations clashed with the cool veneer of corporate necessity, and as Theodore stormed into his office later, furious at the unsanctioned changes in the company, Robert's determination only hardened. Amid accusations of neglect and improvised business strategies, Robert's voice rang out steadily. "I built this company with my own hands, and I will not tolerate any further disruption in our legacy." Edmund Carlisle's carefully maintained empire seemed to tremble under the weight of mounting internal dissension and family secrets. In a terse conversation with his son Theodore just moments ago, Theodore had remarked bitterly that the board was growing concerned. "Williams called me personally to ask if you're experiencing a midlife crisis," he had said, his tone laced with incredulity. Theodore's retort, restrained but seething with discontent, was that if Robert's erratic behavior were to continue, consequences would follow. "The board serves at my pleasure," Robert reminded him coolly, though his low, dangerous whisper, "Don't make threats you can't back up," echoed the severity of the situation. Their tense exchange was suddenly interrupted by a knock at the door, and Evelyn entered unbidden. With her trademark dry humor, she quipped, "Well, this looks fun," immediately sensing the charged atmosphere. "What's broken this time?" Theodore snapped, barely concealing his disdain as he accused his father of hiring the waitress from his party and even creating a new role solely for her. Evelyn, ever perceptive and armed with a calculating gaze, remarked on the distinctive ring the waitress wore. "Of course I noticed," she said, nonchalantly adding, "Emeralds are my birthstone." Her observation, that the ring's style was strikingly reminiscent of those in the old portrait gallery, sent a chill down Robert's spine. He couldn't help but wonder how much Evelyn had already pieced together about the web of secrets twisting through their family. Determined to regain control, Robert asserted firmly that Mrs. Whitman's, as the waitress was now known, employment was not to be questioned. "Her hiring is non-negotiable," he declared with an edge in his voice that brooked no dissent. Evelyn's earlier warning echoed in his ears. This family had long struggled with secrets, and despite the passage of time, nothing ever truly stayed buried. The conversation quickly shifted gears as Robert picked up the phone and instructed Agatha, a trusted longtime housekeeper, to discreetly locate his estranged Aunt Susan. "Augusta," he said quietly, "I need you to find her without drawing attention. I suspect she might know more about Beatrice's involvement in Lucinda's disappearance than anyone else." Susan, his mother's younger sister, had for many years remained isolated from the family's inner circle, but Robert knew that her unvarnished perspective could prove invaluable. Almost immediately after the call, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown sender reading, "I've read enough. We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at the coffee shop, same time." Robert stared at the message, his heart caught in a turbulent mix of hope and apprehension. For 24 long years, the truth about his past had lurked in the shadows, and now it was beginning to emerge with consequences he had scarcely imagined. Driving along the winding roads of the Vermont countryside, Robert watched as the autumn foliage blazed in red and gold hues. a beauty he barely registered while his mind was still entangled in yesterday's weighty conversation with Isabelle. Her words, "My mother told me my father died before I was born," echoed incessantly as he recalled clutching Elizabeth's journal in disbelief. How could his world have been built on such a devastating lie for over 2 decades? The revelations that had surfaced were more disturbing than he had ever anticipated. Fear is a powerful motivator, he mused bitterly as his thoughts turned to the sinister measures taken by his family. According to Elizabeth's journal, as well as Agatha's reluctant confessions, his own mother and Blackwood, a man who was once considered a close family confidant, had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that Lucinda, the woman he had truly loved, and their unborn child, were kept apart. As he approached the old summer estate, a property he had quietly reacquired through a shell company despite having sold it years ago, Robert's mind raced. The caretaker, an elderly local gentleman named Harold, greeted him at the gate. "Place is open up, Mr. Sterling, just as you asked," Harold said, with a hint of confusion about the off-season visit. "Some business matters," Robert replied curtly, handing Harold a generous tip before entering the stately colonial house. Inside, memories swept over him like a tide. The laughter of carefree summers spent fishing with his father, the warmth of holiday gatherings before familial expectations and power struggles had torn them apart. He made his way to his mother's old study, a room that had been forbidden to children for as long as he could remember. Here, Beatrice Sterling had orchestrated her social and charitable endeavors, her presence always commanding respect among East Coast society. The built-in bookshelves still proudly displayed first editions, and the desk, strategically placed to bask in the morning light, seemed to whisper of long-forgotten secrets. Robert searched every nook and cranny for clues about the events of 24 years past. In the desk's drawers he found nothing but old stationery and dried-up pens, and the filing cabinet yielded only records of property and charitable foundations. Just as despair threatened to overtake him, his fingertips caught on a subtle discoloration in the wood paneling behind the desk. With some persistence, he uncovered a hidden compartment that housed a small safe secured with a combination lock. After several attempts using his parents' birthdays and eventually trying the dates Sterling Enterprises had gone public, the lock clicked open. Inside lay a manila envelope labeled simply. His hands trembled as he extracted its contents, photographs taken with a telephoto lens that chronicle a different era, images of Lucinda entering an apartment in 1999, a visibly pregnant Lucinda, then a tender scene of her with a toddler, presumed to be Isabelle. The surveillance halted abruptly in 2008, and tucked beneath the photos were handwritten notes exchanged between his mother and Blackwood. The notes revealed chilling details: monthly payments funneled through a Cayman account, directives for Lucinda to change her identity and relocate, and a stark, unsigned typed agreement specifying that if she ever revealed her child's paternity, financial support would cease immediately. The clinical detachment of the document turned Robert's stomach. They had treated the woman he loved and their daughter as mere liabilities to be managed, a threat to be silenced. His anguish deepened as he read Blackwood's final note, dated 2008, stating that Lucinda, now known as Whitman, had maintained her end of the bargain for nearly a decade, while her surveillance records were methodically destroyed. Overwhelmed with rage and grief, Robert slumped into his mother's old chair. The revelation that his own mother had played a pivotal role in severing him from Lucinda, all to secure the planned merger between the Sterling and Morris families, was almost too much to bear. As his phone rang with a message from Agatha confirming that Aunt Susan had been located in a Maine retirement community, another call from Isabelle, now texting about finding unsent letters from 1999 to 2001 in his late wife's storage unit, sent his heart racing. The messages spoke of a legacy of unyielding love that had been kept hidden from him for decades. Evelyn's urgent call followed shortly, informing him that Uncle Richard was present with Theodore in the library, embroiled in a heated argument. "Daddy, does this have something to do with that ring? With the waitress?" Evelyn demanded. Robert could only respond in guarded tones. "It's complicated, but yes, it's all connected." Before he signed off, he texted Isabelle, "Keep the letters safe. Don't tell anyone what you found. I'm following another lead." Edmund Carlisle's meticulously ordered existence had begun to crumble like fragile porcelain under the immense weight of family treachery and hidden conspiracies. As he drove toward Maine, the disorienting cascade of revelations left him both stunned and determined. In barely 2 weeks, he had discovered the existence of a daughter he never knew, learned of a decades-long conspiracy orchestrated by his own mother alongside his callous brother-in-law, and uncovered damning evidence that the woman he truly loved had been ruthlessly forced away under constant threat. The pastoral beauty of rural New England now lay in stark contrast to the ugliness of the truth emerging from the shadows of his past. The lush, rolling landscapes and ancient maple forests, aflame with the rich reds and golds of an October harvest, seemed almost anathema to the sinister machinations that had upended his life. Augusta, his estranged Aunt Susan, whose unblemished aristocratic features hinted at a refined but less calculating nature than those of the late Beatrice Sterling, waited for him at a quiet retirement community that overlooked the rugged Maine coastline. Over delicate china cups filled with fragrant tea, Susan's trembling hands betrayed her age as she remarked, "I wondered when you'd finally come seeking answers." Her voice, soft with regret, carried the weight of years spent estranged from the family legacy. "You knew about Lucinda, didn't you?" Robert's tone was edged with a mixture of accusation and aching curiosity as he observed his aunt closely. Susan's eyes narrowed slightly. "I knew that Beatrice could go to extraordinary lengths to protect the family's reputation," she replied, her voice low. "When she discovered Lucinda was pregnant, she saw it as a threat to the monumental merger between our families, the union of two of the oldest fortunes on the East Coast. A museum curator with a baby simply did not fit the narrative," she continued, her words heavy with remorse and bitterness. Beatrice, with Reginald's ruthless assistance, presented Lucinda with a choice that wasn't truly a choice at all. "I found the very agreement that forced her disappearance, financial support in exchange for her silence and exile." Robert's fists clenched at the mention of the deal, a cold, calculated contract that had cost him his true love and the daughter he had been denied. "Lucinda loved me," he said bitterly, "and believed I would stand by her." His voice dropped to a pained murmur as Susan recounted how Richard had escalated the situation by threatening her directly, hinting that if she resisted, unimaginable harm would befall either her or her unborn child. "When I learned of these threats, I confronted Beatrice," Susan confessed, "but she dismissed it as unfortunate yet necessary, and that was the last time we ever spoke as sisters." The teacup in Robert's hand rattled on its saucer as he absorbed the reality of his mother's betrayal. "They threatened to hurt my baby, to eliminate the very possibility of my future with her," he whispered, voice thick with anguish. Susan's eyes softened for a moment as she acknowledged the personal cost of their actions. "Beatrice truly believed that preserving our family's position would one day earn your gratitude," she said, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Did you ever try to find Lucinda to warn her?" Robert asked, his tone laced with regret. Susan shook her head slowly. "I hired an investigator once, but the trail had gone cold before I could do anything further. Lucinda Whitman vanished without a trace, and you, heartbroken and defeated, seemed to accept her departure as final. 6 months later, you were married to Elizabeth Wilson." The words stung with the raw truth of how deeply he had surrendered to his mother's manipulations, and Susan's admission left him reeling. Just then his phone buzzed repeatedly with urgent messages. One message read, "We'll call you tonight," while another brought news that his loyal housekeeper, Agatha, had been in a serious accident. With each new notification, Robert's world spun further off its axis. The pristine image of his family legacy, built on decades of carefully maintained appearances, was now forever marred by treachery. The discovery of his daughter Isabelle, a young woman of 23 who was now intertwined with the very fabric of the conspiracy, further compounded his disbelief. And now an incoming call from Evelyn demanded his immediate attention as accusations of collusion and betrayal began to emerge within the very walls of his corporate empire. Robert's thoughts raced as he reflected on the events that had driven him to this moment. His phone rang incessantly, each ring a painful reminder that the truth, however deeply buried, was clawing its way to the surface. The picturesque pastoral scenery of Vermont and Maine, once a source of serene nostalgia from childhood summers and family vacations, now framed a dark tableau of deceit. Approaching the secluded property that had once served as his family's summer retreat, a place he had secretly reacquired via a shell company, Robert's heart pounded with both dread and resolve. The caretaker, an elderly gentleman named Harold, greeted him at the weathered gate. "Everything's as you wished, Mr. Sterling," Harold remarked, referring obliquely to a cleanup of old files from the dilapidated shed. "Reginald was here earlier today, acting on your behalf." Harold's words barely masked the undercurrent of unease as Robert's mind churned with unsettling suspicion. With his phone vibrating incessantly with messages from colleagues and family alike, Robert pressed on. The unfolding drama now threatened not only his legacy, but the very safety of those closest to him. The urgency in his texts, ranging from alerts about intruders to the shocking revelation that unsent letters from his late wife were missing, confirmed that the conspiracy had escalated. As he drove onward, every mile deepened his resolve to dismantle the web of lies that had defined his entire life. The passion with which his daughter's questions and his son's accusations resonated with him was the spark that ignited his determination. He would stop at nothing until every secret was laid bare. Isabelle's voice trembled as she admitted, "It's not something I'm particularly proud of," pausing by the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a sweeping view of Liberty Park. Just 2 weeks ago, her life had been ordinary: a reliable job, a modest apartment, and the steady rhythm of grad school. Even the memory of her dead mother, whom she believed she understood, felt straightforward. Now, as she turned to face Robert with a rueful smile tinged with disbelief, she remarked, "Everything feels like some twisted soap opera." Robert's gaze softened with grim honesty as he replied, "I wish I could tell you it will get simpler." But Isabelle needed more than promises of eventual ease. She implored, "Tell me about her, not just what happened at the end. I've pieced together enough of that nightmare. Tell me about when you knew her, when you loved her." Closing his eyes momentarily, Robert summoned decades-old memories, carefully locked away. "She was unlike anyone I had ever met," he murmured. "Brilliant and unabashedly genuine. Passionate about art history, she cared little for the Anderson name or its fortune." A faint smile curved his lips as his recollections returned. "We met at a charity auction in the Marigold Gallery. I made some pretentious remark about a modernist painting, and she promptly dismantled my argument with a polite yet cutting rebuke." Isabelle's eyes glistened with reminiscence. "That sounds just like Mom," she observed softly, her voice filled with a bittersweet familiarity. "She never backed down from a debate." Robert nodded, the memories of small, rebellious adventures weaving through his mind. She loved impromptu adventures, taking the ferry to New Harbor just to sample a unique pizzeria, exploring forgotten wings of obscure museums, and even stumbling upon poetry readings in the obscure alleys of Old Greenwich. His voice conveyed how revolutionary those experiences had been to someone nurtured in his pristine world. To her, experiences were far more valuable than mere possessions, he added. A shadow fell over their conversation as Isabelle's tone sharpened with indignation. "And then they took her from you because she refused to conform. The Andersons and the Morrises planned our merger and even our marriage for years. Your mother saw Lucinda as an insurmountable threat to everything she had meticulously orchestrated." Robert's lips twisted bitterly. "Yes, my mother viewed her as a disruption to the grand design, and Richard, well, he was nothing short of monstrous." His voice dropped as he recalled the unspeakable threats that had been made, threats that he dared not fully recount. Robert then carefully slid several documents from his briefcase onto the table before them. "These surveillance photos confirm they tracked your mother for years after she left. They even show you as a child, cradled in a park, holding her hand," he explained, his tone haunted. Isabelle reached out with trembling fingers to touch the images. Photos of a toddler set against the backdrop of a serene park, a lasting testament to moments she'd never known. "Oh my God," she whispered, staring at the photographs as if seeing a ghost. "They were watching us the entire time, weren't they?" Robert confirmed solemnly, "Yes, until 2008 when the payments abruptly stopped." The revelation cut deeper than either dared admit. "They had a decade-long arrangement with your mother. Financial support in return for her silence and the assumption of a new identity," Robert confessed, his voice laden with regret. "All this time, I believed the lie they so carefully crafted, that Lucinda had chosen to leave and that she'd even aborted our child. I searched for her for months, but then," he trailed off, shaking his head as he recalled the crushing resignation that led him to marry Elizabeth. I surrendered to what seemed inevitable. I buried myself in work, took my place running Sterling Enterprises, and tried to forget the emptiness inside. Isabelle's eyes flashed with a mixture of pain and accusation as she said, "You could have looked harder, you could have found us." The sting of her words was undeniable, for they echoed the truth. "Yes," Robert acknowledged quietly. "I've failed both of you, and it is my greatest regret." A heavy silence stretched between them, a silence filled with decades of absence, of lost opportunities for reconciliation. Breaking the stillness, Isabelle recalled a detail from one of the stolen letters. "In one of the letters, Mom wrote that she almost contacted you when I was 12. She mentioned a school field trip to the Contemporary Art Museum. Apparently you were there at a donor event, and she saw you from across the gallery, but couldn't bring herself to approach you." Robert's eyes widened as a long-forgotten memory surged forth. "I remember that day vividly, feeling an unexplained presence, only to find nothing but empty space." He paused, his voice heavy with the weight of could-have-beens. "How different might life have been if I had turned to look just a moment longer?" Isabelle continued, her tone a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "There were dozens of letters, all addressed to you, written throughout my childhood. None were ever sent. They chronicled milestones, decisions, and the enduring painful love that she felt for you. And she never revealed who my father was because she was terrified, genuinely terrified, of what Richard might do if the truth emerged." At that moment, Robert's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Evelyn. He excused himself briefly, leaving Isabelle's earnest gaze lingering on his face. When he returned, she asked in a hushed voice, "What is it?" Robert explained that Evelyn had discovered an old contact card in Mom's desk. A card bearing the name Eleanor in Oregon and annotated in Mom's handwriting as her new identity from 2015. Could this mean something? Could she still be alive? Isabelle's voice was thick with emotion. Robert's heart pounded as he recounted the conversation with Evelyn. She had mentioned that such a clue might be significant, though she urged him to keep the matter confidential. "Don't tell Theodore or Richard," she had said. "Trust me on this." After a brief pause, Robert turned to Isabelle. "We might have a real lead now," he said cautiously. "But before we pursue it, we need more information. Perhaps Agatha, still recovering in the hospital, might know more." Isabelle's determination sparked. "Then let's go talk to her," she declared. They made their way, accompanied by one of Robert's security personnel, to Agatha's private room. As they entered, the frail yet resolute housekeeper looked up and murmured, "You look so much like your mother." "You knew her well?" When Isabelle asked, Agatha replied softly, well enough to help her escape when Richard threatened her. "I arranged a car, gave her what little cash I had, and connected her with my sister in California." Robert stared in shock. "You never told me that," he whispered. Agatha's expression filled with quiet sorrow. She admitted, "I promised Lucinda I wouldn't." Isabelle's eyes filled with tears as she pressed, "But why did you stay away all these years, even after the payments stopped?" Agatha's voice faltered before she explained, "Fear becomes a habit, and protecting you, protecting all of you, became my life's purpose." With heavy hearts and a shared determination to uncover the remaining mysteries, Robert and Isabelle steeled themselves. "We will find her," Robert vowed firmly. "But first we must secure my study and ensure that Richard cannot interfere again, even if it turns out that your own brother is involved." His voice hardened, leaving no doubt of his resolve. Isabelle squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Then he'll learn what happens when you threaten an Anderson, especially now when I'm here." As they advanced through the dim corridors toward the study, the fate of the woman they both loved, and the legacy of a family built on secrets, hung precariously in the balance. Robert's heart pounded as he pored over the incriminating evidence spread before him on the polished mahogany desk. The room, dimly lit by the amber glow of a solitary desk lamp, buzzed with the tension of decades of concealed manipulation and betrayal. "I needed to find proof before they destroyed everything," he murmured, his voice low and determined. Every detail now pointed toward a sinister collaboration between Uncle Richard and Theodore, a conspiracy that threatened to upend not only his company but his very life. At that moment, Evelyn had just closed a hidden drawer, her eyes reflecting the gravity of her discovery. "They're planning something, Daddy, something about controlling the company voting shares and..." Her words had faltered as her gaze shifted toward Isabelle, who had been silently watching from the periphery with undisguised curiosity. "You're her daughter," Robert stated, turning slowly toward Isabelle. "Aren't you the woman in those photographs?" Isabelle stepped forward, her face a melange of shock and defiance. "You know about me?" she asked softly. Evelyn nodded slowly, admitting, "Not until recently. I found old surveillance photos, hidden among Mother's possessions after she died. Images of a woman with a child," she continued, her voice trembling with the weight of long-held secrets. "The dates on the backs of the photos coincided with when Dad was supposedly involved with someone our family disapproved of." Turning to Robert, she added, "I didn't grasp the true significance until I saw her wearing grandmother's ring at your birthday party." "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" Robert inquired, the pain in his voice unmistakable. Evelyn tilted her head, her expression resolute. "The Andersons taught me to gather all the facts before revealing my hand. It's our family motto, appearances above all." A bitter smile briefly crossed her face, etched with years of cautious subterfuge. Before Robert could respond further, the chime of the main door shattered the momentary quiet. "Are you expecting someone?" Evelyn asked, glancing toward the entrance. Robert shook his head as he quickly checked the security feed on his phone. "It's Theodore, and Richard's with him." "Don't let them in," Evelyn urged, her voice rising with urgent alarm. "Richard's dangerous. I overheard him on the phone yesterday, talking about handling the situation permanently if necessary." Robert's jaw tightened as he absorbed her warning. "No more running, no more hiding. It's time we confront this head-on." With a measured nod, he instructed the security system to admit them. He then positioned Isabelle behind his desk, his tone grave as he confided, "If anything goes wrong, there's a panic button under here. Press it and security will respond immediately." The heavy oak door swung open and in stepped Reginald First. At 62, his silver hair was impeccably styled, and his lean, imposing frame carried the cold confidence he'd long wielded to intimidate business rivals. Behind him, Theodore entered, his expression a volatile blend of anger and apprehension. As the two men gathered in the tense space, Richard's thin smile never quite reached his eyes. He let his gaze linger on Isabelle for a moment before remarking with a measured condescension, "How touching! And Mrs. Whitman, I suppose you're undoubtedly the spitting image of your mother, aren't you? You'd know, considering how long we've had you under surveillance." Isabelle's retort was cool and steady. "Given how long you kept a watchful eye on her, one would expect you'd know more than you're letting on." Richard's smile tightened fractionally, and Theodore interjected, "Dad mentioned you've been making some discoveries. Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Robert said, his voice even yet laced with authority. "Whatever you have to say will be said when my daughters aren't present." Theodore's face flushed with indignation as he protested. "This is ridiculous, Dad. You can't seriously be claiming that some random waitress is an Anderson based on an old affair." Robert's voice dropped to a pained murmur as he continued, "It wasn't just an affair. Lucinda was the woman I intended to marry before she mysteriously disappeared, before your mother and Uncle Richard forced her to leave through threats." "That's a serious accusation, one that would be difficult to prove after all these years," Richard interjected smoothly. "Is it?" With deliberate calm, Robert retrieved several documents from his briefcase. Surveillance photos, financial agreements, excerpts from Elizabeth's journal detailing the menacing threats, and even Agatha's testimony about helping Lucinda escape. Richard's composure wavered ever so slightly as he muttered, "Ancient history. Even if true, the statute of limitations doesn't apply, does it?" Robert cut him off sharply. "Nor does it apply to what happened to Agatha yesterday, or to the break-in at Isabelle's apartment." Evelyn's eyes flared as she interjected forcefully, "We found Eleanor." Her words rang out as she fixed her gaze on Richard. "Mother's notes led us directly to her, the new identity you helped Lucinda adopt in 2015 when you discovered she was still in contact with Agatha." The color drained from Richard's face as his bluff was unmistakably exposed. He hadn't even confirmed Eleanor's location yet, but his reaction confirmed the suspicions. "She's alive, isn't she?" Isabelle stepped forward, her voice trembling with unspoken pain. "My mother isn't dead." The room fell into a suffocating silence as Richard calculated his next move. After a long, measured pause, he finally sighed. This has all spiraled out of control. I was simply protecting family interests, as your mother instructed me. By threatening a pregnant woman, his tone shifted into defensive bitterness. By forcing her to live in perpetual fear and keeping her away from the father of her child. Beatrice was adamant that nothing should interfere with the Anderson-Wilson merger. Robert's voice grew dangerously quiet as he retorted, "You destroyed the woman I loved. You kept me away from my child, all for the sake of stock portfolios and social standing." Theodore stepped forward, pleading, "Dad, be reasonable." But Robert's reply was unyielding. The Anderson name means something, but real family means more than the artifice we've maintained for generations. Richard snapped, "That artifice built your fortune. It gave you everything you have." "Not everything," Robert countered fiercely, his eyes never leaving Isabelle's. "It cost me my daughter's childhood. It cost me 24 years with the only woman I ever truly loved." "Love?" Richard sneered dismissively. "Your mother understood the bigger picture. Where is she? Where is Eleanor?" Isabelle demanded, tears welling in her eyes. Richard's face darkened and he replied, "Even if I knew, why would I tell you? So you can dismantle generations of carefully laid plans?" His words were cut short when Agatha entered the room, supported by a nurse. Despite her evident injuries, she exuded a quiet strength as she said, "You should be in the hospital, Mr. Anderson," reaching for Robert. But Agatha's gaze locked onto Richard, and with trembling resolve she declared, "I've kept silent for too long, no more." From her pocket, she withdrew a small digital recorder and pressed play. Richard's menacing voice filled the room as he threatened, "If you say one word about Lucinda Whitman or what really happened, I'll make sure you never leave this house alive." The recording chronicled his role in orchestrating both of Lucinda's disappearances, the most damning part being his admission of forcing her to vanish a second time in 2015, when he discovered she was in contact with Agatha. Tears streamed down Isabelle's face as she whispered, "You made me believe my mother was dead. I've spent 3 years grieving someone who's still alive." Richard's composure crumbled as he attempted to justify his actions. With a menacing tone, Robert demanded, "Where is she?" Agatha answered in a quiet voice, "Brookings, Oregon, a small coastal town. She works at a community center there under the name Eleanor." Theodore instinctively moved to reach for his jacket, but Evelyn was quicker, intercepting his gesture. "Don't," she warned firmly. Robert then leveled a final ultimatum at Richard. "You have 2 options. Sign a full confession about your actions toward Lucinda, or I'll release Agatha's recording to the police and press." Richard's face contorted in fury as he spat back, "You wouldn't dare destroy our family's reputation." In response, Robert's voice rang out, "Watch me. The Anderson name means nothing compared to the people I love." Finally, Richard's shoulders slumped in defeat as he muttered, "I'll sign whatever you want, but this isn't over." As the tension reached its zenith and Bartholomew shifted uncomfortably behind his desk, he observed, "This is highly irregular." Robert then explained, "What you read in Elizabeth's will was incomplete. She left additional provisions to be revealed only under these very circumstances." Richard sat rigidly, his usual commanding presence diminished. Anderson had instructed that this addendum be opened only in the presence of both Robert Anderson and Reginald. Robert's heart pounded as he absorbed the damning evidence laid out before him. In the hushed, tense silence of the expansive study, every whispered secret and hidden document now converged into an explosive revelation. "I needed to find proof before they could destroy everything," he murmured, his voice heavy with both determination and sorrow. The gravity of the situation weighed on him like an iron shroud. His own family had betrayed him in unimaginable ways. It was now clear that Uncle Richard and Theodore had been conspiring behind closed doors, scheming over every company vote and secretly manipulating the family's fate. Evelyn had just shut a concealed drawer with a decisive click, and her eyes were filled with a mix of apprehension and steely resolve. "They're planning something, Daddy. Something about controlling the company, voting shares, and..." Evelyn's voice tapered off as she fixed her gaze on Isabelle, whose quiet yet intense curiosity radiated from across the room. "You're her daughter," Robert stated softly, turning his gaze toward Isabelle. "Aren't you the woman in those photographs?" Isabelle stepped forward, her face a mixture of disbelief and defiant hope. "You know about me?" she asked, her tone tinged with equal parts pain and expectancy. Evelyn, nodding slowly, admitted, "Not until recently. I discovered these old surveillance photos hidden among Mother's belongings after she died. A woman, a child. It all matched the timeline when Dad was said to be involved with someone our family disapproved of." She paused, then continued, "I didn't understand the significance until I saw her wearing Grandmother's ring at your birthday celebration." "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" Robert asked, his voice breaking slightly with regret. Evelyn tilted her head, a bitter smile crossing her lips as she replied, "The Andersons taught me to gather all the facts before playing my hand. It's our family motto, appearances above all." Her words resonated with the cold precision of a calculated legacy. Yet they betrayed a deep personal anguish. Before Robert could respond, the soft chime of the main door echoed through the room. "Are you expecting someone?" Evelyn inquired, glancing toward the entrance. Robert quickly checked the security feed on his phone and announced, "It's Theodore, and Richard is with him." Evelyn's tone shifted, laced with urgent warning. "Don't let them in." Her eyes narrowed as she recalled overhearing Richard's chilling conversation the previous day, during which he threatened to permanently handle the situation if necessary. Robert's face hardened. "No more running. No more hiding," he declared, his voice low and resolute. "It's time we confront this head-on." He then instructed the security system to admit them and discreetly positioned Isabelle behind his desk. Leaning close, he whispered, "If anything goes wrong, press the panic button beneath this desk. It will summon immediate security." The heavy oak door swung open as Reginald entered first. At 62, his silver hair was immaculately combed, and his lean physique exuded a cold, intimidating confidence that had long been his trademark. Theodore followed, his expression a volatile mix of anger and apprehension. As the two men gathered in the charged atmosphere, Richard's thin smile belied a hidden malice as his gaze lingered on Isabelle. "How touching," he remarked dryly. "And Mrs. Whitman, I presume? You bear a striking resemblance to your mother, something you'd certainly know, given how long we've observed you." Isabelle's retort was cool and measured. "Considering the time you spent surveilling her, one would expect you'd know more than you're letting on." Richard's smile tightened fractionally, and Theodore interjected, "Dad mentioned you've been making some discoveries." Robert's tone, laced with painful determination, cut through the tension. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," he declared, emphasizing that whatever must be revealed should be spoken without the presence of his daughter. Theodore's face flushed with indignation. "This is absurd, Dad. You can't seriously claim a random waitress as an Anderson based on some long-past dalliance." Robert's voice dropped to a pained murmur as he continued, "It was no mere affair. Lucinda was the woman I intended to marry before she mysteriously disappeared, before your mother and Uncle Richard coerced her into leaving." Richard interjected smoothly, "That's a serious accusation, one that would be difficult to prove after so many years." "Is it?" In response, Robert extracted several documents from his briefcase. Surveillance photos, financial agreements, excerpts from Elizabeth's journal recounting menacing threats, and even Agatha's testimony about assisting Lucinda's escape. Richard's composure faltered visibly as he mumbled, "Ancient history. Even if true, the statute of limitations does not apply." Robert cut him off sharply. "Nor does it apply to what happened to Agatha yesterday, or to the break-in at Isabelle's apartment." Evelyn's eyes flashed as she suddenly declared, "We found Eleanor!" Her voice rang out as she fixed her gaze on Richard. "Mother's notes directed us to her. The new identity you helped Lucinda adopt in 2015, when you discovered she was still in contact with Agatha." The color drained from Richard's face as his bluff was exposed. He hadn't even confirmed Eleanor's whereabouts. Isabelle's voice quavered as she stepped forward. "She's alive, isn't she? My mother isn't dead." A thick silence enveloped the room as Richard calculated his next move. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he muttered, "This has spiraled out of control. I was simply protecting the family interests as your mother ordered." By threatening a pregnant woman, his tone turned defensive as he added, "By forcing her to live in fear and keeping her away from the father of her child." Beatrice was adamant. Nothing should disrupt the Anderson-Wilson merger. Robert's voice became dangerously quiet as he shot back. "You destroyed the woman I loved. You kept me from my child, all for stock portfolios and social status." Theodore stepped forward, pleading, "Dad, be reasonable." But Robert's reply was unyielding. "The Anderson name means something, but real family means more." Richard sneered. "That artifice built your fortune. It gave you everything." "Not everything," Robert countered fiercely. "It cost me my daughter's childhood. It cost me 24 years with the only woman I ever truly loved." The room trembled with raw emotion as the confrontation reached its peak. Robert's heart thundered in his chest as he stepped through the threshold of the modest wooden house perched atop a wind-swept bluff overlooking the restless ocean. The faded blue paint on the siding, worn by decades of coastal storms, lent the building a melancholic dignity, a stark contrast to the tempest of emotions and revelations that had led him here. Every inch of the journey, every painstaking memory now culminated in this long-awaited reunion. The winding gravel path from the driveway to the time-worn front porch had been a metaphor for the arduous road his heart had traversed over the past 24 years. A journey defined by betrayal, loss, and the desperate hope that the truth might one day be restored. Standing in the cool evening air, Robert recalled the tumultuous debates that had rocked his life since the unveiling of the explosive evidence. Evelyn's quiet yet firm insistence that they're planning something had triggered a cascade of investigations and secret discoveries, plans orchestrated by Uncle Richard and Theodore to seize control of the company's voting shares. Their sinister machinations, cloaked in familial loyalty, had forced a lifetime of silence and compromise. And now, as Isabelle's eyes shimmered with an unspoken plea for justice and truth, the echoes of their shared history reverberated in the stillness of the twilight. Inside the house, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of trepidation and defiant hope. Robert's mind darted back to that moment when Evelyn had revealed the surveillance photos, a series of clandestine images hidden away among Mother's belongings. The photos had documented an unknown woman with a child, dating back to when he was rumored to have been involved with someone deemed unacceptable by the family. It was not until Isabelle had seen that woman wearing grandmother's ring at his birthday party that the hidden significance had been laid bare. The Anderson family's tacit doctrine of appearances above all had kept the truth obscured for so long, until now. A soft breeze stirred as Robert recalled his conversation with Evelyn moments earlier. "I needed to find proof before they destroyed everything," he had confessed in a low, resolute tone. In response, Evelyn had admitted that the family had always taught her to gather every bit of evidence before revealing any secrets, yet now, the accumulated facts formed an explosive narrative of manipulation, deceit, and family betrayal. "They're planning something, Daddy. Something about controlling the company voting shares," she had whispered, her voice trailing off as she directed her intense gaze toward Isabelle, who had been listening with undisguised curiosity. Now, standing at the doorstep of this isolated refuge, the weight of unresolved memories pressed heavily upon him. "It is not that she wanted to be alone," Robert had reminded her softly earlier, his voice thick with remembrances of painful sacrifices. "She ran away to protect you." Yet, as Isabelle countered, "We're bringing back everything she ran from." A new sense of determination surged among them. Uncle Richard is now facing criminal charges, and Theodore has practically vanished since the board meeting. In time, this whole sordid story will become public, and she deserves the right to decide for herself. Evelyn had echoed those sentiments in a quiet, measured tone, challenging the very notion of imposed silence and long-held deceptions. As the GPS indicated their arrival, they found the house exactly as described in faded memory. A humble, weathered structure with a winding path leading to a porch that overlooked the vast, untamed ocean. "It's exactly the kind of place she always dreamed of," Robert murmured, his voice softening with reminiscence. "Simple, intimate, a refuge surrounded by nature, with a view that speaks of endless possibility." The three exchanged silent glances as they gathered their courage for the next step. Isabelle's voice trembled with both vulnerability and resolve. "Maybe I should go in first," she suggested, fearing that her sudden appearance might be too shocking after so many years of longing and absence. With a supportive squeeze from Evelyn on his shoulder, a rare but heartfelt gesture of solidarity, Robert nodded reluctantly and remained seated in the car, his heart heavy with anticipation. In a few measured moments, Isabelle approached the front door and knocked slowly. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes until the door finally creaked open, revealing a woman whose silhouette was at once hauntingly familiar and profoundly transformed. There she stood, Lucinda with silver strands interwoven through her once vibrant chestnut hair, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and tentative hope. Even from a distance, Robert could see the shock and lingering sorrow etched across her features, evidenced by the hand that instinctively flew to her mouth as she took in the scene. In that suspended moment, Isabelle spoke, her words tentative yet laden with love. "Dad, the ring. Our daughter was wearing your ring." At those simple words, the force of lost time seemed to collapse. Lucinda's eyes brimmed with tears as she looked from Isabelle to Robert. "I never thought this day would come," she whispered, her voice quivering with 1,000 unshed tears. "I've imagined it so many times but never truly believed it possible." Richard's voice, full of resigned menace, echoed from behind the gathered family. "It is necessary, protecting the family interests." Robert stepped forward, his tone resolute and imperious. "Richard, your threats, your manipulations, they're over. Your time of controlling everything through fear has ended." Lucinda's gaze, caught between defiance and sorrow, met his. "Is it really over?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible against the crash of distant ocean waves. "For 24 years, Robert replied firmly. "Every time I thought it might be safe, something would remind me of the terror you imposed. But no more. We have Richard's signed confession, Agatha's testimony, Elizabeth's journal, every piece of evidence that confirms that you forced her into hiding." His words hung in the air, an indictment of decades wasted. "It's time to reclaim our lives, to let truth guide us, not family lies." Lucinda stepped slowly from the porch, wrapping an arm protectively around Isabelle. Her eyes, though weathered by years of sorrow, still shone with unyielding determination. "I was forced to disappear, not because I wished to be alone, but to protect you both," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of regret and newfound courage. "For so long, I lived in fear, believing Richard's threats would shatter us if I ever returned." She paused, gazing out over the roaring ocean, then turned back to Robert. "I have always imagined this moment, though I never believed it would actually come." Robert's eyes glistened with regret and hope as he looked at the only woman he had ever truly loved. "I tried to move on, to bury my pain in the responsibilities of the empire, but nothing could ever fill the void left by you," he confessed. "I gave you my ring as a promise of a future together. Today, I ask, let us start anew, not by picking up where we left off, for too much has been lost, but by forging a new path, with honesty and truth as our guide." Lucinda's voice trembled as she replied, "I am not the same person you once knew, and neither are you. We have both been shaped by the choices forced upon us by a ruthless family legacy, but some things, my love for you, remain unchanged." Her words lingered like a benediction in the salt-tinged air. Isabelle, clasping her mother's free hand, added, "No more running, no more hiding. We face whatever comes next together." Evelyn, watching this fragile reunion, softly murmured, "I'll take Isabelle into town for supplies, so you both have time to talk and rebuild." For a long, sacred moment, Robert and Lucinda sat together on the wooden steps, watching the waves crash on the distant shore, a poignant reminder that while the past could never be erased, there was still hope for a future defined by truth and genuine connection. "Why didn't you ever tell me you were pregnant?" Robert finally asked, the question that had haunted him for decades. Lucinda's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "I was going to, but then Richard showed up with his photographs, evidence of the cruelty inflicted on those who dared defy him." Robert's voice, thick with emotion, promised, "I would have protected you both, no matter the cost." Lucinda's hand, trembling yet resolute, accepted his outstretched hand along with the emerald ring, a symbol of a promise made long ago and rekindled now. "I'd like to make that promise again," he said softly, "to build a new future with our eyes wide open, one day at a time." Their first genuine smiles, born of shared pain and tentative hope, illuminated the gathering dusk as the sun descended toward the vast Pacific. Robert and Lucinda began to converse deeply, finally speaking the unspoken truths of 24 lost years, their regrets, their love, and the dreams they had once dared to share. As Isabelle and Evelyn returned, they found Robert and Lucinda walking side by side along the beach, their shoulders brushing together in quiet solidarity. In that transformative moment, as the waves whispered secrets to the shore and the sky blushed with the promise of tomorrow, they knew that though the past was irretrievable, a new beginning was possible. A reunion not only of two souls but of a family determined to embrace honesty, love, and the fragile hope of redemption. In the soft, golden glow of the setting sun, as the last vestiges of daylight melted into the horizon, a quiet miracle unfolded on the weathered porch of a humble coastal cottage. Here, amidst the gentle whispers of the ocean breeze and the rhythmic crashing of waves against rocky cliffs, two souls, once separated by decades of relentless pain, betrayal, and forced absence, finally stood face to face. After a lifetime marked by secrets and heartache, they were now finding their way back to each other, inching slowly toward reconciliation and the promise of a new beginning. For years, the weight of unspoken regrets had buried their once boundless love beneath layers of duty and sorrow. The past had been a tapestry woven with threads of family politics, arranged mergers, and relentless ambition, a tangled web that had kept them apart. Yet, in that quiet moment when twilight embraced the shore, every frozen heartbeat seemed to thaw, and the memories of a long-forgotten joy began to breathe once again. With each step on the creaking wooden porch, their shared history unfurled like an old cherished song, a symphony of longing and loss, punctuated by the hope that time could heal even the deepest wounds. Lucinda, the woman whose eyes had once sparkled with unfiltered passion, and who had been forced into a life of seclusion under a new name, now stood before Robert with a strength that belied the years of solitude. Though her hair had silvered and the soft lines of time had etched themselves onto her once flawless face, her hazel eyes burned with the same fierce determination and unconditional love that Robert remembered so vividly. For decades she had hidden from the world, not out of a desire for isolation, but to protect the fragile promise of life that had sprung from their forbidden union, a promise that was embodied in their daughter, a living testament to a love that had never truly died. Robert, for his part, felt the heavy burdens of loss and regret slowly lifting with each tentative smile and every shared glance that carried the unspoken apologies of years past. His mind, once dominated by the relentless demands of a sprawling corporate empire and the cold, unyielding expectations of a powerful family, now fluttered with soft, cherished memories of a life that might have been. The echoes of laughter from sunlit afternoons, the tender reassurance in whispered confessions, and the clandestine meetings beneath the cover of starlight, all resurfaced as a balm for his weary soul. Now, with the approaching darkness casting long, hopeful shadows across the porch, they embraced the painful beauty of rediscovered love. Isabelle, whose own journey had been interwoven with the threads of secrets and half-truths about the past, watched with a mixture of awe and empathy as her parents began the slow, tremulous process of reconciliation. In the gentle embrace between Robert and Lucinda, she saw not just the unyielding love that had sustained them through years of separation, but also the potential for healing. A chance for her own fractured identity to be mended by the rediscovery of her true lineage. The young woman had grown up in a world of lies, piecing together fragments of a lost history from surveillance photos, clandestine recordings, and whispered confessions. Yet now, in the purity of this moment, all those shards of pain began to form a mosaic of truth. Evelyn, ever the guardian of family honor and the cautious keeper of secrets, observed the unfolding reunion with eyes that glowed not with judgment but with cautious optimism. Though the wounds of the past still ached, she recognized that the convergence of truth and forgiveness was the only path forward, a path that might finally free the family from the oppressive grip of long-standing deceptions. In the quiet interplay of glances between father, mother, and daughter, there lay an unspoken promise that from this day forward the cycle of silence and submission would be broken, and the legacy of the past would be transformed by courage and honesty. As the sun dipped lower, casting a molten amber light over the rugged coastline and the modest wooden house, a profound silence enveloped them. It was a silence laden with both sorrow for lost years and the stirring of hope for days yet to come. Every creak of the old porch, every whisper of the salty wind, and every soft murmur of the ocean seemed to signal the start of something new, a slow, courageous return to a life built on love rather than manipulation. Robert reached out, his hand trembling as it closed around Lucinda's, and in that single touch, years of anguish and isolation melted away. "I gave you my ring once," he said, his voice thick with emotion. as a promise of a future we could share. Today, I ask if you would allow me to make that promise anew, starting fresh, with nothing but the truth and the hope of rediscovered love. Lucinda's eyes shimmered with tears, yet there was a glimmer of resolve in their depths as she replied, "I have spent so long living in fear of the past, of what might come, but now, I see that I no longer have to hide. I will choose you, and in doing so, I choose the truth over the lies that once held us captive." Their voices, overlapping in a whispered exchange, melded with the sound of the surf and the rustling of the coastal trees, forming an impromptu symphony of reconciliation. It was not a resolution that erased the pain of 24 lost years, but it was a declaration, a promise that moving forward, every step would be taken together. Every stolen moment would be redeemed in the light of newfound unity. And so, as the last rays of the sun sank into the embracing darkness of the Pacific, Robert and Lucinda stood together on that weathered porch, their silhouettes bathed in the soft glow of twilight. In that breathtaking moment, they were no longer defined by the betrayals or the hardships of the past, but by the undeniable truth of their enduring bond. They were finding their way back to each other after a lifetime apart, ready to forge a future built on love, honesty, and the unyielding hope that, despite all odds, redemption was still within reach.